And we are live with the PHU Dynasty podcast. We are back again after a little bit of a hiatus, if you will, after the rookie draft. Let it sink in for everybody. Today we have I would say the star of the show for the rookie draft this year, Adam Thibodeau, the GM of the Chili Cheese Fries, to kind of break down what he was thinking on each one of these picks and hopefully give some insight too into the rest of the draft. So how you doing, man?
Doing good. I've never had the experience of owning so many picks in a draft, especially after having so many years of not being able to participate. So going from one end of the spectrum of just watching casually and really not knowing too much about the players to being like all in for like a couple months leading up to the draft and like trying to figure out what I want to do with my team, but also how I feel on these players. I gotta say, it might have been like the most enjoyable time in Dynasty of just like working through the dynamics of like drafting and trying to build for your team.
Yeah, I mean, I love drafting, and as you can see in the recent moves I've made, I'm getting back to my roots, if you will, and building through the draft, and I'm hoping to have a similar experience in the next couple of years. So I'm excited for it, and I'm sure you're definitely not done. I think you still got three next year and three the year after that. So you have exciting times ahead, but basically today on this episode we're going to try to keep it a little bit more brief than usual. We got the Lightning game to watch in a little bit. However, we are going to go through each of the picks. Since I gave my thoughts on the Discord chat kind of for the first two rounds for grades, I'm going to see if I can get some extra reviews here from Tibbs, talk about each of his picks, and of course the rest of the draft. So let's just hop right into it, and we're going to get right into the first round, and we're going to start right off the top. We got Breece Hall, uh, ended up on the Jets, goes to the Cheese Fries at one. I'm just going to let you dive right in. What is it about Breece Hall that made him more appealing than perhaps the longer term players? I say that longer term as in running backs usually don't have quite that shelf life that the receivers do. What was it about Breece Hall that was special?
Yeah, so I mean, I what I did to prepare for the draft was, of course, just create a big board and made sure I did my thorough research on every player. And I just came to the conclusion. I just put in my notes that like Breece Hall is like a can't miss player. Like you have to take him. I don't really care where he goes as long as a running back of his stature gets carries, which he certainly will. The Jets might not be an ideal landing spot in the overall history of our fantasy play, but just watching him play, and I feel like I've done a fairly good job at evaluating running backs in my draft history. I just see him as like a can't miss running back. He's got all the tools. He had 3 years at Iowa State where he produced to a tremendous level. He never got hurt. He always got touchdowns. He covers he checks the boxes of the athletic profile, the production profile, the durability profile. He's elusive. He has breakaway speed. I loved a couple of other players that were at the top of this board too, and it was between him and I'm happy to be transparent now that the draft is over. It was between him and Drake London for me. I like Drake London a lot, but I felt like Atlanta already has Kyle Pitts. So Kyle Pitts is going to be a dynamic that's going to work against him, particularly because they don't have a quarterback yet that can raise the fantasy production level. Obviously, anything can change. We've learned after watching A.J. Brown get traded and seeing all the craziness that's happened this offseason that you just want to take players and not take landing spots. But I felt like Breece Hall just is the safest absolute pick. He's not going to bust. He's going to be productive. He's young. He's going to be – he's 20 years old now, but he's going to be – he's like Joe Mixon for me when I was looking at it. Like he's going to do everything you want, and he's still going to hold value in a couple of years. So if I'm in a position where I need to flip him at some point in a couple of years, maybe I love the position that I'm in with him in terms of winning a championship in our league. it's going to be pretty easy to flip him if I needed to. Drake London, he doesn't have the same sort of skill set as Mike Evans. I think Mike Evans came out and he was a little bit sharper in terms of some of the boxes that you want to see. But at the same time, I feel like he's probably a can't-miss player too, and it was really tough to try to decide between the two. I mean, draft day, I was going back and forth between the two players because you can make an argument that, you want to take wide receivers for the longevity. There's not as much up and down in terms of their value. But I also don't want to miss on my picks either. And I felt like the Kyle Pitts competition, the lack of quarterback, Breece Hall just won't miss. And, however it plays out, I'm going to get a locked-in running back, probably a top 10 dynasty running back for the next couple of years. And I'm fine with that. I just don't want to miss on a player.
Yeah, to me, he was the safest player in the draft. And I kind of looked, in terms of his college production and how much he did there. And he kind of came right in after David Montgomery, who had an excellent college career as well. And that's his absolute floor in the NFL, in my opinion. I don't see him being any worse than David Montgomery's, worst year. Like he's going to at least return some sort of RB2 value from that slot. And Drake London, like you mentioned, I do agree. The comp is easy because you look at him and he looks like Mike Evans. I don't think he's quite Mike Evans. Like you said, he isn't as sharp. I don't think he's as big as people make him out to be. He's only 6'4", like 220. Mike Evans is like 6'5", 230. I mean, Mike Evans is a freak. I don't know if Drake London is a freak. And I have a hard time, when I look at both of these guys in my, pre-draft rankings, I had Hall 1 and London 2, simply because I think that these Breece Hall comps and the way his profile sits up, he's very similar to Jonathan Taylor was when he came out, and I called him generational. So I think I'd at least say he's something close to Jonathan Taylor coming out, and you can't pass on that. So completely agree.
Yeah, and I a couple of points that he was in a outside zone scheme. He went to a team that runs that same offense, so that's a plus. With Mike Evans, yeah, I mean he's probably once in a generation type profile. And Drake London does have some route running ability, and he does have the ability to sink his hips, but like you said, he's not as big either. So if you're there's a lot of commentary on his ability to separate pre-draft and contested catches and what that means for the NFL. I was personally not worried about it because I felt like I saw enough talent from him. But at the same time, I just want to make sure that I'm not missing on any of these valuable picks at the top end. And we'll get to it with Garrett Wilson. I had him under Drake London, but he was right there too. I mean, he might not have the height, but the way the NFL is playing right now, he has every other skill set that you're looking for: the athleticism, the running ability, the hands, the route running ability, the hands. So I knew going into the draft, trying to play scenarios of, okay, if I took, let's say, Breece Hall, what's going to be there at 1.5? If I took Drake London, what's going to be there at 1.5? I figured if I'm taking Drake London, I'm not going to get Breece Hall. There's no way around it. He's not going to make it to 1.5. I figured if I take Breece Hall, there are receivers that can contend and might, allow Drake London to slip. It didn't play out that way, which is fine. But I figured I also need to look at that context of what I'm doing as well to make sure that I'm getting as many of my top graded players as I can. So we'll get to pick 1.5, but that's pretty much a summary of how I felt about Breece Hall. And, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I think it's a little overplayed. And, Dynasty, obviously, you want to try to remain consistent and have assets that can last you 8 years or longer. But at the same time, like you said, with Jonathan Taylor, he may not be Jonathan Taylor. Maybe he'll be similar. But running backs that produce at that high level are hard to get. They're going to require you to pay a lot for them. And those are the ones that really help you win championships. And I figured my draft strategy over these next couple of years is I'm going to try to load up on receivers, of course. That's what I did in this draft. But if I can take an absolute elite running back when I have the opportunity to, I don't think I can pass that up, because I want to see my team have the top end running backs, and then I can work on everything else with all the picks I have at other positions like receiver.
Yeah, and like you mentioned earlier too, you take a guy like Breece Hall. He's 20. In 3 years will be 23, which is the same age as Najee Harris coming out. So I mean, you're going to have value for the next 4 years in case changes of plans happen. So we talked about Breece Hall. Don't need you to give you a grade for that because that's your pick. And we did talk about Lennon at a decent length. So what do you think for the Muskrats? How do you grade that pick? Do you like that pick for him?
I thought it was a fantastic pick for Alex. That's the pick that I would have taken if I was running his organization. I think Drake London's, him and Breece Hall were neck and neck. Depends on your preference, really. I give Alex an A grade for taking Drake London. I felt at 1.2 and 1.3, he should definitely walk away with Drake London, and then from there we can have a conversation of what he should do at 1.3. But I'm very proud of him for taking the right player.
Yeah, so getting the 1-3, Treylon Berks, after the drafts, ended up happening. AJ Brown on his way out. Basically, they put him in the AJ Brown spot at Treylon Berks in the first round. And, I really like Berks as a player coming out. He was a bit of a polarizing guy. I think he was, he's not quite as polished, which, of course, whenever you hear that, it never makes you feel good, when you take him. But he also has crazy attributes and was very productive in college. And he's been kind of talked about over the last 2 to 3 years. If you've been following college football, he's kind of just been out there. So the Muskrats, I think we're shooting for the stars a little bit on this one, just hoping that he can get to that, AJ Brown level, which is very possible considering it's the exact same offense that they've been running. But, he passed on a running back, and, after seeing, these recent moves that's been made in our league, it's very interesting that he ended up taking Berks, because now he's gone out and acquired running backs and whatnot. But it's interesting to see how that folded out. So I like the pick for Treylon Berks, now seeing the rest of the moves he's been making, whether or not you like the moves he's been making, now at least it looks like there's some cohesive plan here. So
I have a plan in place.
There is a plan in place. But how long will the plan stay the plan is the question. That's anybody's guess. So Treylon Berks, give me your grade for the Muskrats here at 1-3.
Yeah, with Treylon, he was a polarizing player for myself. I kind of went back and forth on him. When I first started studying him, man, he really had a profile, just watching film, that I felt was more on that bust side of things, in my personal opinion. What I saw was a guy who is just bigger and faster and stronger than everyone at the college level, and doing it in the SEC, of course. That's impressive. But he doesn't have very much technique or refinement in his route running. And that scares me, to be honest, because when you go to the NFL, they know your weaknesses. They know what you're able to do. So Treylon, in my opinion, would need to go to an offense that is, creative. They're able to get him the ball and help him win where he wins. I still graded him 4 overall in my power rankings going into the draft, even besides going to Tennessee, even after going to Tennessee. So it's not like I'm down on Treylon Berks.
Yeah, I had Wilson ahead of him.
I did too. My top 3 were Breece Hall, then Drake London, then Garrett Wilson. And the reason for that is Garrett Wilson might not be as big as him, but he's better at pretty much everything else, in my opinion. And he's the safer pick. And for dynasty purposes, when you're drafting this early, I just don't want to miss. So I think Treylon Berks was a fine pick for Alex. I think it was better that he took Treylon Berks than Kenneth Walker, in my opinion. And we'll get to Kenneth Walker, but I would give Alex an A+ for the 1.3, in my opinion, if he took Garrett Wilson, because that's how I would have evaluated it and done it myself. But I think Alex knows what he's getting into. He saw that A.J. Brown got traded. You just replace Treylon Berks right in that spot. He knows he's a boom bust profile, but Alex is also the type of player that does want to swing for the fences a little, and he doesn't mind missing. So I'm not going to bash him by any means. I think Treylon Berks is probably going to take a couple years, maybe like a Mike Williams did in San Diego or L.A. But I do think there's some risk to his profile too, and we've seen some chatter in the offseason, and it's early, right? Like they were talking about Jamar Chase can't catch, and that was just not true last year. But there is a risk profile, and I feel like it is going to, just like you said, I think it's going to take him a little bit of time, maybe like 2.5, 3 years before you start seeing elite production from him.
And we can wrap up on this note. That whole profile where there's not a lot of refinement, kind of. And I hate to compare it to him now, but back in college when he came out, it was very DK Metcalf like. A lot of people were just like, oh, he just runs go routes, he just does bubble screens, he's huge, he's fast, and he was in the SEC. It's a very similar type of deal. So I mean, it could end up being a similar situation with the pro production, or like you said, it could kind of fizzle out based on some of the negative chatter we've already kind of heard. This whole asthma thing, I don't think I've ever heard about asthma issues before until this year, so that's very weird. But let's go ahead and keep moving. We got the Bombers at 1.4 taking Kenneth Walker. He was a guy, prospect wise, that I really liked watching on film. He didn't do it for a long time. He was a 1-year wonder. He actually transferred from Wake Forest after his first 2 years, goes to Michigan State and absolutely just slaughters. He was amazing. And I think he's a better receiver. As I mentioned in my Discord chat, I think he's a better receiver than people give him credit for. He just literally just didn't do it in college. Like they didn't even ask him to. I think he had like 10 catches. But I just like the way he runs the ball. And I don't like the landing spot that much. I mean, I like the player. They will run the ball in Seattle. I just don't know how that's all going to shake out. Rashad Penny's still there for the short term. Justin's kind of a short term, like win now's team. He has, guys for down the line that are great too. But like, I feel like the window right now is pretty wide open for Justin. So I understand, trying to take the running back and get something going now, but Kenneth Walker may take, a little bit of time to get into, and he definitely has some bust potential in my opinion.
Yeah, well, in terms of Justin taking Kenneth Walker, he already participated in trying his best with Penny, and that's been rough just because of injury. Whenever he got on the field, he's been very productive. I don't know if I would have the stones to do what Justin did and dip back in and take another running back when you already experienced the Seattle backfield. I understand that he figures, he has one of them at some point. One of them's going to be the starter, and then he'll just start that player. I had Garrett Wilson rated higher. I thought he was the safer player to take, and considering that Justin absolutely destroyed last draft with Kyle Pitts and Jamar Chase, if he, in my opinion, if he took Garrett Wilson, that's just adding back into that consistency where he's going to be locked and loaded and keep building this team, and then he can figure out the running back position later on. I felt like Kenneth Walker is an absolute terrific runner. Like you said, his catching is to be determined. He kind of, what I put in my notes, he doesn't have the production at least showcased yet for catching, but I thought he ran a lot like Maurice Jones-Drew did back in the day. He might be not as chubby, but he really kind of ran similar to his style, and I think that's what Kenneth Walker is. I think he's probably going to be a pretty good back in the NFL, but he's got a lot of volatility considering Seattle doesn't know where they're going right now in terms of their offense. They look like they're doing a whole rebuild right now, and they've always been known that they want to run the ball, but they've never really had consistency with one player. So I'll give Justin like a B or a B plus for the pick. I had Garrett Wilson ranked higher. I had Kenneth Walker rated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I had him 6 overall on my board. I had Chris Olave higher, and Garrett Wilson higher. And this was pre-draft, and I actually didn't change my rankings whatsoever due to team landing spots because I just believe in player talent when I'm going to be evaluating. So I think it was a fine pick, but it's not the pick that I would have made.
Yeah, I mean, like I put in my notes for my draft grades, I did give it an A simply because I just like the player. And like you kind of said, player, usually the talent will take over. And I understand the want for getting running backs. And with Justin, he didn't have any picks until 2.4 in the next round. So, after Walker, there was a huge drop off in the running back kind of pool, if you will, this year. I think then my next highest one on the board was probably Rachaad White or James Cook in the second round. So this was your shot, in the first round to get somebody that looks like they're going to be a starter very quickly. So I understand that, and I think that's probably why I ended up giving him an A. But like you said, he comps very similarly to Maurice Jones-Drew. He's just not quite the same size, but I kind of comped him to like James Robinson. He's more of a smaller power back, not a ton of receiving chops, but there's something there. So I like the pick. I think there's bust potential there, but I like the pick. I think if it was me, I would probably go with you and go Garrett Wilson, just because that's how my board was laid out as well. But it's not bad at all. So let's go ahead and talk about Wilson. I really, really like Wilson. I think if you watch him on tape, he's just a great route runner. And he's a very young guy. He's beat out a lot of good players to get onto the field there. He beat out Jameson Williams. He beat out Jackson Smith and the Jigba for next year. He was honestly, I thought he was better than Chris Olave this year. He's just not physically imposing. He's just like a very average looking guy out there. He doesn't have this giant stature. He's like, I think he's like 6'1" or 6 foot, like 180. He's just like a normal looking guy. But I comp his gameplay very similarly to like Keenan Allen. He does a lot of the same things that Keenan Allen does. I just think he's faster and not as big. I really like that pick for you at 1.5. Frankly, that was tremendous value, and clearly the plan worked. That you can get basically two of your top three guys in the top two, at pick 5. So that worked out really good for you. So I gave you an A, and Garrett Wilson's good. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, man. I mean, when Justin was on the clock inside, I was absolutely praying that he would take Kenneth Walker, because I was not going to take Kenneth Walker at 1.5 because I took Breece Hall at 1. So I'm not going to double dip on the running back. And I didn't have Kenneth Walker as my 5th overall player if the board fell that way anyways, because I had it. I don't have any problem being transparent with my board now that the draft is over. I had a Breece Hall 1, Drake London 2, Garrett Wilson 3, Treylon 4, Olave 5, then Kenneth Walker 6. So obviously we'll get to Skye Moore and Chris Olave conversation next, but I wasn't going to allow myself to start this rebuild by taking Breece Hall and then taking Kenneth Walker. And it's just because Kenneth Walker doesn't have that elite production in terms of receiving where I would feel comfortable doing it. Maybe if if there was a copy and paste mold of Breece Hall that came to 1.5, then that'd be a different conversation, but I didn't evaluate him that high. Garrett Wilson, I'm thankful that he fell to 1.5. I had him 3rd overall on my board. I wasn't planning on trading up to get him because I just figured one of these players is going to hopefully fall to me. I thought about trading up to get Drake London with Alex, but when I first started evaluating the players early, Garrett Wilson was number 1 on my board at one point. Like I was just watching him, and I'm
very
like, wow.
Similar to me. I had him way above Drake London at one point, like early in the season.
Yeah, I was on a flight to, I think it was Utah, and I almost honestly, when I was on the flight, I almost texted you, and I was like, Garrett Wilson is amazing.
He just looks good, man. He just looks good.
He's so good. Like, he does everything that I want out of a receiver. I can't, help that he doesn't have the same height, so he can't win in terms of his size like Treylon might or Drake London might. But he's got great ball skills. He's got great body control. He's got terrific route running. He's got speed. It showed it at the combine. You can see it on the film. And this is a player that's very young too, and he's just going to keep getting better. So, I mean, I felt like it was a great player to take for dynasty rebuilding purposes. It's a great player across the board in fantasy. Obviously, we're putting a lot of stock in what the Jets are going to do as an offense and what Zach Wilson's going to do. And for full transparency, I am not a fan of Zach Wilson.
I don't think it matters though. I think if Zach Wilson stinks this year, he's gone anyway. They'll draft another one, and you just start over. And Garrett Wilson's like 20, so like it doesn't even matter. Like 5 years from now, if it's Zach Wilson and he's great, he'll be 25, and you'll have Zach Wilson paired with him, or they just keep trying until they get it right. And frankly, the Jets have never really gotten it right, so it's just a matter of like they're just going to have to find one at some point. You're just kind of rolling the dice every time with the quarterback anyway. So that's why I kind of view the same thing with like the Eagles offense. You know, if like Jalen Hurts isn't it this year, just roll the dice again next year to try to find out. And like the floor will still be there because of his talent. That's just the way I'm looking at it. Yep. Same thing with Breece Hall, honestly.
Yeah, with Joe Douglas, I love what he's doing in terms of turning.
It definitely seems like they're turning a corner.
Yeah, I mean, he's taking good players. He took good players last year. I mean, Elijah Moore's a great player too. Obviously, he's going to get his share. But Garrett Wilson's going to be a player who that talent isn't going to change in terms of his stock and his production in the NFL. Obviously, if he gets an elite quarterback throwing him the ball, then that'll elevate his floor and create a ceiling for him that he probably can't touch at the moment with Zach Wilson. But I just want to take the player for the most part and try to overlook who the quarterback is at the moment who's throwing him the ball, because the scenario can change. We'll get to Skye Moore next and how I evaluated him and Chris Olave, but I'm very pleased with taking Garrett Wilson at 1.5. I felt like taking Breece Hall at 1.1 and Garrett Wilson at 1.5, those were like slam dunk opportunities for me. So I'm very thankful the way that the draft played out.
Yeah, and I think once you look at those first two picks, and then once we get to 1.6 here, you know, you've got two, in my opinion, very safe prospects. You know, they're not I mean, maybe you could say that Breece Hall's can't miss, but they're not like can't miss guys, but they're very good. And that's really when you're in a rebuild like you are, that makes sense. But I also think now that you have these two guys in the fold, 1.6 becomes a conundrum of, okay, we go safe and go Chris Olave, in my opinion, because he's kind of in that range of like, hey, you know, he's okay. He doesn't stand out in any real aspect of the game. He's kind of like honestly, just like a little bit lesser version of like a Devontae Smith from last year. Or we could go for big money, and especially because you have Mahomes, we could go for big money and Skye Moore, and you know, maybe he can be something that fills in for Tyreek Hill and turns out to be a huge hit, and it's going to look like a genius move in a couple of years. I loved it. I like the Skye Moore pick, honestly. Like I know a lot of people had, you know, other guys maybe ahead, and even I did, to be honest with you. I don't think Skye Moore was, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure he was closer to like 8 or 9 for me. I definitely had Williams ahead, and I had Olave ahead, but that was just like my team at the time. I think I at the time I was still not rebuilding, so I think I was like more interested in having more of a steady Eddie kind of guy. But you know, I think Skye Moore has some serious upside. He was really good in college, and he's smaller, but the way he plays, he could play outside, he could play inside. The Chiefs they just have a bunch of guys right now at receiver. I don't think any of them really stand out. Like Juju's okay. You know, Marcus Valdes-Scantling, I'm not worried about. Any of the other guys that they've added, I'm not super concerned about. So like he's going to have an opportunity very quickly. And I put in my comparisons that he's very similar to Victor Cruz. He's got that like big play ability, but he's also kind of like a safe guy too. Hopefully his career lasts longer than Victor Cruz's because of injuries, but I love the home run swing pick. I think I gave it a B- in my picks because there's guys I just ranked ahead of him. But in your position with also having Mahomes having the potential huge stack, like I'm okay with it for sure.
Yeah. Well, starting with landing on the Chiefs, we knew that was a destination that everyone was hoping one of these receivers would go to. They've shown that they're willing to give opportunity to Mecole Hardman as much as possible to showcase what he can or can't do.
Yeah, and he stinks.
Yeah, and they're going to do the same thing with Skye Moore. They're going to give him all the opportunity in the world the next couple of years to see what he can do with Patrick Mahomes. We know that Kelsey's getting older, still very productive, but let's just say Kelsey plays for another 5 years. They have to replace the receiving production that they're missing out on with Tyreek Hill. He's not going to be a one-for-one by any means with Tyreek Hill, but in terms of the player profile and what I thought about him before the Chiefs took him, I mean, he was on the same tier as Olave and Jameson Williams for me. I started watching him play, and maybe it's the fact that he wears number 24, but the way that his body moves, it reminded me, and I have it in my notes, he gives me an Austin Eckler vibe, but he plays receiver.
It's very shifty.
Yeah, like he just finds ways to win, and he's graded as one of the best route runners. He's got great hands. He's fast. I was going back and forth on holding one because I previously had 1.8, and I knew based on how the board would fall, I'm all likelihood either going to get Skye Moore, Chris Olave, or Jameson Williams at 1.8. But given that I can trade up just a 2.10, and I had all those picks, and Scavelli was willing to trade with me for a 2.10, and I was like, you know what? Where 2.10 is and the player that I'm going to get there, I'm fine with just getting the guy that I feel like has a higher ceiling. I think Skye Moore can be like a DJ Moore type of player in the NFL, but he's going to be tagged with a quarterback that can keep him consistently putting up highly productive fantasy games. Obviously, we don't know what he is until he gets on the NFL field, but just based on evaluating him, I felt like he's going to have tremendous upside, and he's going to have a good floor too. And they don't have a whole lot of competition, like you said. I mean, I think Juju's a good player, but he's not anything special. MVS, he just played with Aaron Rodgers, and
Just not worried about him.
Yeah, he wasn't able to prove anything with Aaron Rodgers, so I'm figuring he's going to be the same player with the Chiefs in all likelihood. We'll get Olave and Jameson Williams, but for me, it was between Skye Moore and Olave. I think Olave is the safer player, like you said. He's pretty much like a version 2.0 of Devontae Smith, maybe a little bit less than. But those types of players in fantasy, they're going to be drafted, in the 5th or 6th round every year. They're not going to have high ceilings. They're going to have good floors. You want Olave to be tagged with a quarterback who's elite, and we don't really know what's going to happen with the Saints, and they've got other players there as well. So I figured, I'm just going to go get my guy instead of letting one of them come to me, where I feel very, very satisfied with the compensation that I traded up to get. I had to give away to get him, and also just knowing that I could hit really hard on this pick. And I already felt good about him before knowing he was going to the Chiefs. So just after the fact, it's just like gravy on top.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and pretty much echoes like my opinion on the pick in general. I like the home run idea, and you could just sit around and take Olave, and he could just be kind of a middling guy, and that's okay. But in Dynasty to win, you got to have elite guys, and I'm not sure Olave will get there. Whereas there's a chance that Moore does. There's a pretty good chance, like just based on the offense he's in. So let's go to 1.7. We'll keep this rolling. With the Kentucky Elk taking Olave at 7 overall. I think this is fine value. I think it's, Dustin is an interesting team as far as his team build. We've said multiple times on this podcast, we're not entirely sure where the team's going. There's some older guys. There's a lot of young receivers, but not a lot of like studs. And this kind of echoes the rest of that, to be honest, this pick. Not quite a stud, but the last time that an Ohio State receiver came out like this, I was very wrong. It was Terry McLaurin. I think he's very similar to him coming out, and maybe I'm just completely wrong and it's just another Terry McLaurin, and that's awesome. But even if it is a Terry McLaurin, it's still a Dustin receiver right now. It's just not anything that's going to blow you away. And Dustin has some of the best depth in the entire league, in my opinion, right now. I just want to see him, go for that next level, and get some more shoot for the stars kind of players. Whereas maybe I thought Jameson Williams or Christian Watson, like maybe a bit more on the upsidey type of deal. But I like the pick. Just you can't say too much bad about a safe pick. Like it's just a good quality safe pick, and Olave is good, so I think he'll be at least a solid player for him. But I wonder if he's ever going to get to the next level.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think Chris Olave was a terrific pick for him. That he only had so much to work with, right? Like if he wasn't going to trade up, he had to just take what was going to come to him, and that's the player that I would have taken as well. I think Chris Olave, he, like you said, he probably will have a very, very similar fantasy level of output as Terry McLaurin. Brian Hartline's done a terrific job developing in Ohio State receivers. And
people don't know that he's the wide receiver coach there.
Yeah, and they keep bringing more and more talent. And he, from what I've read, he speaks very, very highly of Chris Olave. And, I'm sure that's why the Saints went after him, because they hit the jackpot at one point with Mike Thomas, too, from Ohio State. So they probably had the same word on Olave. He's a can't-miss player. You got to take him. And he's a great route runner, a great football player. I don't know what his upside is without having a quarterback that's proven. Jameis can make a production out of receivers, but we don't know how long Jameis will be there. Either way, I think Dustin did a really good job with this pick. It's the player that I would have taken, but he does have a boatload of these types of players, which is, in theory, it's good for Dynasty, but Dustin's also like right in the middle of the muck because he hasn't really hit on receivers in the past, and now he's doing a good job of taking them over the last 2 years. But he's missing out now. In my opinion, Kamara might have seen his best years already, and he doesn't have any of those players that can really elevate him to the top of our league. So, it's a good pick. It's the pick I would have made.
All right, we'll keep rolling to the guy that you might say would be the other guy to consider at that 1-7 spot. It's Jameson Williams for me at 1-8. I really like Jameson Williams coming out. If it came down to Olave or Williams, I would have taken Williams personally just for the upside, especially now that in the position I'm in, I'm all about just getting some upside guys, especially towards the end of this first round. I personally wasn't in on Johan Dodson at that spot, and Christian Watson was another guy I considered. Watson, I was a little bit hesitant on because a lot of times guys with his profiles don't work out, and I just wanted somebody that had a good profile, that also, had production against legitimate SEC talent. I mean, a lot of folks don't even know that Jameson Williams was behind Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. I think he was the 5th receiver at one point at Ohio State, and transfers to Alabama and pretty much takes over for that Henry Ruggs role in that offense. And he's just a bigger version of Henry Ruggs, really. He's kind of got that Will Fuller type body style. He's like a taller guy that can really stretch the field, but he's a decent route runner as well. Hopefully there's not injury issues like Will Fuller. But I really like the upside with Williams. Obviously the Lions is not, nobody wants Lions guys right now, especially at receiver, with Jared Goff. But I also think in the similar situation to the Jets, that team is kind of turning a corner in my head. I think they are, at least. And I've said this before, and I've been completely wrong about the Lions, but they seem to be at least trying to move in the right direction now. So I will gladly take the lottery ticket here. I think a lot of other people in the league may have had Jameson Williams higher on their boards, maybe as high as 5, honestly, 5 or 6. So I thought the value was good, and I just wasn't in on the remaining receivers. Honestly, I was considering George Pickens because I originally had 9, moved up that spot with Scavelli just to get Williams. I didn't want to miss out on Williams and then have to decide between Pickens and Watkins at 9, or Pickens and Watson at 9. So I thought it was a good pick for me. And I'm really now in a great wait and see position where I can just see what happens. And if it's great, great. If it stinks, it stinks.
Yeah, on a couple fronts. I mean, he was the 8th player on my board, so I would have taken him too because all of the players above him were ranked higher. So I think it was a great pick by you. Moving up from 1.9 to 1.8 was a smart move on your end as well, since you were getting that, in my opinion, the last elite prospect in that tier before the drop-off happened. I felt like once 1.8, all the players above, once they were all selected, then it would have been a pretty steep drop-off, in my opinion. Jameson Williams, I had mixed feelings on him. He wins at a couple things, but he has a profile that is very, very boom or bust, in my opinion. In college, in college you can have the burner ability, and in the NFL you can do it too, but for fantasy purposes, there's not a lot of players that we look at year over year that are ranked high that their main attribute that they win at is just speed. I mean, Tyreek Hill, obviously, but that Tyreek Hill opportunity probably plays a large part because he's playing in an offense that is very creative at getting him the ball, and he's got Mahomes who can make every throw no matter what the offense.
But he's also a freak too. I don't think Jameson Williams is a freak.
No, and he had a lot of body catches that I just didn't feel comfortable with. I mean, it seemed like that's how he catches the ball, is body catching, and he could probably work out because he's got good enough route running. But he did feel like the most risky player in that tier to me.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So I would have taken him at 1.8 too, but I do have some concerns about him. But like you said, where your team's at with your rebuilds, that's kind of, in a way, the perfect player if you're going to take him and if he's there, because you don't really need the production right now. Now, at the same token, how do we feel about a player that's not produced in his first year? Is his value going to go down? You just have to understand that's what you're getting into. But I like what the Lions are doing too. I think that their GM's doing a great job of rebuilding it. I mean, I'm just a fan of these GMs who are building from the offensive line and defensive line to start, and then they're taking good players with later picks. I know they traded up to get Jameson Williams, but just in general, I feel like the Lions are another team that are ascending.
Yeah, and with Williams too, I've kind of thought he's also coming off that ACL injury that he suffered towards the end of last year. It was always going to kind of be a wait and see. I don't even think he's going to be ready for the start of the season anyway. So, just in my spot, I'll give it a roll. And like I think you mentioned too, there is a pretty big drop off here at 1.9 with Scavelli taking Christian Watson. Scavelli hasn't had a first round pick in quite a while, if my memory recalls. So usually these picks at the end of the first round are Scavelli winners. So maybe I should have just stayed put and take Christian Watson. I don't know. We'll find out. That being said, I really like the upside. Obviously, everybody does. I mean, he's playing with Aaron Rodgers for at least a few years. He's huge. He's 6'4", 208. He runs 4.36. He's raw as all hell. But that could work. It could work. I mean, is he an MVS, or is he going to be somebody much better than MVS? And I compared him to Brashad Perriman coming out because he was almost the exact same type of prospect. He literally didn't do anything at UCF. He was huge. He was fast. He got drafted in the first round by the Ravens and kind of ended up doing nothing, which is very well in the possibility for his outcomes. But he also could get I would say that Brashad Perriman situation with him and Joe Flacco, he's not Aaron Rodgers. So, Aaron Rodgers could just put him under his wing. He's the highest receiver they've probably taken in a few years. He's probably going to be like, hey, listen, you're a freak. We all know it, but here's what you got to do. And similar things happened with Devontae Adams back in the day, where it took him a while to get going. I think it took him almost 3 years to really get into that next level. The problem is I don't think Scavelli has 3 years to wait, which is the only thing that concerns me about this pick. I think Scavelli needs to win in the next couple of years here, while his Derrick Henry still has the wheels. And then, of course, he's made a couple of trades as well for Saquon Barkley, who's technically in his prime. Things have to happen now. So I'm not sure if Christian Watson helps right now. But, in 3 years, when maybe that retool ends up happening, he'll be there. And, I think I gave it a B- as a pick overall.
Yeah, for me, I wasn't even going to touch Christian Watson. I had him ranked 21 on my board, to be honest.
21?
Yeah.
Holy shit. I thought I was low on him.
I wasn't going to touch him at all. He was
wow.
Him and James Cook were the players for me that everyone has ranked higher, and I'm just not going to touch them. And it's going to work out because someone that I want is naturally going to come to where I was picking. With Christian Watson in my notes, I had him comped to Stephen Hill. Big, fast, skinny.
Denzel Mims is another one that reminds me. All these guys.
Yeah, Denzel Mims is a little bit thicker, but like Christian Watson, he had terrible drops. He had like 12% drop rate. He played at a level that, they were like high schoolers that he was playing with, so he was just the athletic freak. He could work out. He's got the traits, of course. He blew up the Senior Bowl, but I just wasn't feeling it whatsoever. I watched his tape, all of the plays that I saw that he made.
Just long touchdowns.
Yeah, like end arounds, just burning past people. He didn't show me anything that I saw, and I don't, there's not a ton of tape on those games, but I didn't see anything that I felt comfortable in terms of translating to the NFL. And obviously, we know some of these players are going to bust, and he's just not a player that I felt comfortable taking. If he was at the end of the second round, like I said, at pick 21, I would have taken him there. But for Scavelli's purposes, so I wouldn't have taken him. So I feel like I would give Scavelli a bad grade, but I'm not here to give anyone a bad grade. But like Scavelli needs to win now. That's what he has built his. Over the past couple of years, that's what he's built his team to do. He doesn't have very many picks. Christian Watson is probably not going to produce year one. It's going to take some time to, gain trust for Rodgers. Obviously, they don't have a lot of weapons to use, but they're just going to end up having a run-centric offense. Aaron Jones is going to be right dead center in the middle of that offense, and he has Aaron Jones. So, double dipping on the Packers is always a good strategy, but I'm just not a fan of Christian Watson, so I'm just gonna let Scavelli know that I thought he should have taken another player. That's all.
Yeah, I think we may have had similar thoughts on a couple of these guys here at the end of the draft, because I had like Johan Dodson in that range that you had Christian Watson at. I think I had Dodson at 19 or something, and it's just different strokes for different folks probably at this point in the draft, because. Like you said, there was that clear-cut drop-off after 8, and frankly, you could have most of these guys kind of interchangeable with a lot of different spots. There was not a lot of differentiating assets, in my opinion, in this area. So I think I had Watson somewhere at the top of the second, and that was fine for me just for the upside alone. I had Pickens higher for sure, and a couple of other guys as well. But we could transition right into Dotson here. Like I said, I think I wrote it as well. I don't think he's that good. I wonder if it's going to be a similar situation just to the classic small receiver doesn't pan out. John Ross is out of the league. It could be. That being said, for your team, you're rebuilding. This is a first-round receiver as far as draft capital is concerned. We've learned from the past that first-round draft capital means so much as far as dynasty. Like a decent example, he's not anywhere near elite, but like Brandon Ayuk was a first-round receiver. Everybody just kind of let him slide, ends up going at 2.5 or whatever, and at least is productive because they're going to get him the ball. They invested a lot in him. They're going to at least try, right? It's not going to be, oh, he'll never see the field. He's going to be on the field. So I think from an upside perspective, he has it, and he's definitely going to be able to show that he has the upside. But do you think he's going to be a complete receiver in the NFL? Because I just don't right now.
Yeah, Johan Dodson was not a player throughout the whole process that I felt was competing with those other receivers. I mean, he was on the next tier for me. He has good traits. He's got fantastic hands. He's a very good receiver for zone purposes. He's got good route running. He's small though, small frame. He's got fine speed. He ran like a 4.44, I think, which, we're all excited about people who run 4.38s and 4.39s now, but 4.44 is still very good.
It's fine.
Yeah. I was pretty surprised when I saw that he went at like pick 16 overall by Washington.
I thought that was horrific at the time. I was watching the draft. I did one of the, oh my God. So it's like, why? Why are we doing that?
Yeah, I thought that was early. I mean,
it was bad.
Going into the draft, I figured he'd probably go around like pick 32, somewhere in that ballpark.
I thought he was the top half of the second round guy. That's just...
But what I will say is he has a body type like a Deontay Johnson, where he's 5'10", $179 maybe. And he's only like an inch shorter than Garrett Wilson, and he's maybe like 5 pounds smaller than Garrett Wilson. I feel like he's like a discount Garrett Wilson to a degree. I mean, I didn't evaluate him on the Garrett Wilson level, but he's got traits that can be similar. He's just not as good of a player, but I've been following these players that I take and other players through the off season, and we're super early right now, but there's a lot of positive news on what Dodson's doing to the 7-on-7 secondary in practice. And obviously, who cares what happens until week 1 starts and we actually see them produce. But for my rankings, I had Johan Dodson ranked 10th overall. I never changed my rankings after the draft happened because I just want to believe in how I evaluated everything going into it. But I had him pick 10. So it's right where I figured I would probably end up taking him when I did the practice of, going through, okay, if I took this player here and how the board should fall, I'm going to end up probably getting this player or that player, or making a decision on this player or that player. So I figured I'd probably end up getting Dotson at 110 or 2-1. Overall, I mean, at pick 110, historically, he's probably too early for that type of player. He's probably more like a 2.5, 2.6 type of player. But this draft class was talent heavy up front, and then it died off pretty quickly. But he got first round capital, so they're going to give him opportunity if he can, get targets. That's all that matters. The Washington already has Terry McLaurin, who's an awesome receiver. I mean, if you threw Terry McLaurin into Green Bay's offense, like, he would just explode.
So good.
Johan Dodson, he'll be like a rotational player, and then we'll see what kind of peak he has. If he can hit his peak of like a Deontay Johnson, and that's wishful thinking, great. If it doesn't work out, that's fine. But I just wanted to follow my board, and he was in the muck of. For me, it was in this tier after Jameson Williams. It was Rachaad White, Johan Dodson, George Pickens, David Bell. Those players were in that same tier for me. And I had back-to-back picks at 110 and 2.1, so I knew I was getting 2. So I just started off with Johan Dodson. You can flip it and say Rachaad White, because I had Rachaad White ranked ahead of him in my rankings.
I was going to say, I think there'd be a lot less controversy if you had taken him at like 2-1 or something. Like, just nobody would even, it would be like, okay, great pick. Yeah, it's just like, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, you can flip them either way how you want. But going into the next pick, I took Rachaad White, and he was in that same tier. That if you want to go to the next slide.
I was thinking here. Listen.
Oh yeah.
We're getting kind of long on time. I think we're 55 minutes almost, and I think we got the Lightning game starting. So maybe we just roll this into like a part 2 for another day, perhaps.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just because we did. I think the round 1 discussion, it was justified in going so long because round 1's what everybody gives a shit about, really, at the end of the day. And we could blow through, rounds 2, 3, 4. perhaps in a rookie draft part 2 podcast. So I think it would be a good idea to cut it off so we can watch the Lightning try to keep their hopes alive here. So
That'd be perfect. More content for the offseason.
Yeah, it's not like we have nothing, limited time. We got 3 or 4 months here before we even get started doing anything, but we do have quite a bit more content as well planned out. I know James and I have discussed doing a Dynasty Dynabook podcast. I think he's working on some stuff behind the scenes at Dynabook. And then we're also planning some sort of like a Q&A type thing where he's going to ask Sean and I questions. So that's going to be kind of cool. And then we haven't even discussed any of this today, but Alex has completely changed the trajectory of his team in less than a month and a half. So I think we might need a State of the Union Part 3 as well. So I think that'll be out there as well. So I think we'll have, and we haven't done any team reviews, any of that stuff that we kind of did last year. I think we'll probably reformat those for this year, so we're not doing every team one per episode. But we have a lot to get through. So let's cut it here at round 1. We'll call this the round 1 draft review. And I think we had some great discussion. I think we got really granular on each one of these prospects, which I don't think we've really ever done in these rookie draft reviews. I think we've gotten, we said, oh, this player's good, and he ended up in a good spot. Here you go. But we haven't really talked about, is he a good route runner? Is he, what's his profile? This is probably one of the more informative podcasts that we've done. So this has been really good. So I definitely want to thank you for coming on, and hopefully we can get you on other ones.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. I mean, I was looking forward to it. I love talking fantasy in general, but just with how much time I invested in this draft, it was very enjoyable to work it leading up to it, and then just evaluating how everything went after the fact.
Yeah, you had the picks this year, so you're the obvious choice for the draft review podcast. So we will see y'all next time, and I'll let you all know in the Discord when we get another date for the rounds 2, 3, and 4. So see y'all later.